actually really interesting to be following Laurel at a conference. We end up at a lot of events together, and to our clients and at conferences we often talk about similar things. Today, thankfully, you're not going to get two of the same presentations back to back, which is good for you and makes me look a little bit better too. Anyone here study English literature at school? Australian literature? What's that title from? Anyone?
My favourite movie?
The Getting of Wisdom is the title of a book by Henry Handel Richardson, who is one of the great Australian colonial authors. And the dedication in the book by Henry Handel Richardson is to my little collaborator. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about collaboration. In The Getting of Wisdom, the protagonist, Laura, is a creative and imaginative girl who, when she's sent at 12 years old to boarding school, is forced to conform, is forced to fit the mould, is forced, because her mum had to work, to suffer at the hands of the rich girls whose mums don't work. It's a little bit unusual for me to be talking about this stuff because it's not quite what I usually talk about. My usual focus is on communication, on users of systems, and particularly on social media. I talk at events like this and with my clients about things like using social tools inside their organisations, about using them to talk to clients and customers and stakeholders and suppliers, on sharing knowledge, and on doing it in innovative and open ways to change culture. So there's a link. But let's put some of it into perspective and set the stage. At times, I have to take a step back and look what I'm doing. I read and reread what I've said online. I see what I say on Twitter. I see what I say on social networks and on my blog. I have a lot of views on a lot of things, all of them connected in some way. I am, as innovation expert Tom Peters, who someone I admire a lot, says, a professional loudmouth. To no small extent, I'm also a professional thinker. I'm constantly looking for a better way to do things, faster, higher, stronger, but I'm always focused on making things better for people. And this doesn't always work. In more than one organisation I've worked for, I've clashed with or been counselled by management for being someone who rocks the boat, who isn't afraid to express a view, who has too many ideas, who isn't a team player, where not being a team player means I'm willing to point out the way things could be done or changed. I've been counselled for being someone who doesn't blindly accept the way we do things around here. In fact, when I left the public sector 6 years ago, it was because I sat down with a manager for a regular performance review and had this conversation. Steve, you're an interesting guy. You have great ideas, you're a good communicator, you're very motivated and engaged. So far so good, right? But you know what? You just don't fit around here. You're too willing to express your views. You're too willing to point out our problems and how you think they might be solved. You can't rock the boat like that if you want to get ahead. I think you need to decide whether here is where you want to make a career. Because if you don't want to change, you need to decide whether this organisation is where you're going to stay or whether you're going to go. Now, to the internal credit of that senior manager, he did something quite unusual. He offered me expensive and very valuable training. I say valuable not in the sense of the dollars spent on it, but in terms of the things that it taught me. I was gone less than 3 months later. Too many organisations are fixed in their thinking. The way we do things around here model that defines corporate culture is locked in and unchanging, or at best subject to change over only long periods of time. Too few organisations welcome and foster mavericks. Too few organisations encourage their people to actively dissent and develop new ideas and ways to do things. Too many organisations are stuck in a rut with the ability to rapidly adapt and adopt to changing conditions, missing from their capabilities. Innovation is talked of and stated as a goal, but it's very much not the case. Equally, notions of work-life balance, of collegiality, of openness instead of siloing, are spoken of often, but equally often fail to live up to the expectations set in the minds of employees. In order for our organisations to succeed, this needs to change, and to change dramatically. Who here has ever seen a TED video? Okay, if you've not seen a video, who knows what TED conference is? Okay. I fulfilled a lifetime dream. Has been around for 25 years in February. I got to go to TED. And Clayton saw me speak about that experience in March, and I think that's why he got me here today. As an atheist, TED was probably the closest thing I've ever had to a religious experience. There I was, immersed for nearly a week with 2,000 other people, professional loudmouths and thinkers. Every one of us, speakers and attendees alike, looking for a way to build a better mousetrap for large values of mousetrap. I felt entirely at home. These were my people. There's not a person in that place who thought for a moment that the way we do things around here was necessarily the right way. Who thought that we couldn't come up with a better way. Who thought that there was an enormous global problem, the financial crisis, global warming, the crisis in Darfur, that couldn't be solved with our right heads getting together, and they were probably at TED, with the right funding, and just bloody doing something. It was a mighty contrast to the week before, when Davos was held. There, the mood was bleak. Suits were looking backward to seek causes for the problems we faced, rather than looking forwards for the solutions. The financial crisis has had a major effect on many of us. I know for a fact that I've had less business here in 2009 than I did in 2007 and 2008. And organisations aren't always dealing well with the issue of retaining staff as they feel the pressure of the recession. I have at least 2 friends here in Canberra who have lost their jobs directly because of misguided thinking of what we need to do to respond to the recession. In a recession, and have no doubt that we are in one despite what politicians and the technical definitions might say, the bottom line becomes incredibly important. The mighty dollar rules many decisions. Projects done, staff hired and fired. That's a legitimate approach, but what it ought not to do is turn people into Niccolo Machiavelli. And to one extent, in some places, it has. Just last week, I read a piece in the Sydney Morning Herald where an employer was quoted as saying, on the matter of reducing working conditions for their staff, "We can do anything because people are afraid for keeping their jobs." I suggest that's not only a very uncaring view on the part of the employer, but it's plain evil. Employers like that, and thankfully they are few and far between, won't survive after the recession, as people will leave, and they'll do it as soon as they can. For the rest of us, what we can't afford to do as employers, as managers, as recruiters, is allow little parts of that thinking into our work. We can't think that treating people as assets is okay. That hiding things and not working in an open way is the right thing to do. That stifling new or big ideas because we can't afford to do that right now will get us through tough times.